King Leopold II, a man driven by insatiable ambition, gazed upon a map of Africa, envisioning an empire for Belgium, a small nation lacking a colonial footprint. While European powers scrambled for their pieces of the continent, Leopold plotted a more insidious path, masked by philanthropy. He saw not just land, but untapped wealth, resources that could fuel his personal coffers and elevate his status amongst European monarchs. His dreams were not of national glory, but of personal dominion, a vast territory under his sole, unquestioned rule, far from the prying eyes of parliamentary oversight or international scrutiny. The stage was set for a monumental deception, one that would shroud an entire continent in darkness. The late 19th century witnessed the frenzied scramble for Africa, as European empires raced to claim territories, driven by industrial needs, national prestige, and a flawed sense of civilizing mission. Empires like Britain, France, Germany, and Portugal carved up the vast continent with arbitrary lines on maps, largely ignoring indigenous cultures and existing political structures. This period was characterized by aggressive expansion, ruthless competition, and often violent subjugation of African peoples. Leopold understood this geopolitical chessboard perfectly, recognizing the opportunity it presented to stake his own claim, not through direct conquest by Belgium, but through a cunning scheme designed to circumvent direct state responsibility and control. Leopold crafted a brilliant, albeit sinister, deception. The International African Association, IAA. He publicly declared its noble aims: to abolish the brutal Arab slave trade, establish humanitarian outposts, and bring civilization and Christianity to the heart of Africa. This facade of philanthropy garnered international support, portraying Leopold as a benevolent ruler, a champion against barbarism. He presented his venture as a selfless endeavor to open the continent to free trade and progress, a mission driven by enlightenment rather than exploitation. This clever marketing allowed him to secure crucial backing from unsuspecting European and American leaders who genuinely believed in the humanitarian rhetoric. To realize his ambitions, Leopold enlisted the renowned explorer Henry Morton Stanley, a figure celebrated for his dramatic search for Dr. Livingstone. Stanley, a man of immense will and questionable ethics, was dispatched to the Congo Basin. His mission: to establish trading posts, build roads, and most crucially, secure treaties with local chiefs. These treaties were often fraudulent, signed under duress, misinterpretation, or intoxication, effectively handing over vast swathes of land and sovereignty to Leopold's private enterprise. Stanley's relentless expeditions mapped the intricate river systems, laying the physical and political groundwork for Leopold's future state, and unknowingly paving the way for unimaginable suffering. The climax of Leopold's diplomatic charade unfolded at the Berlin Conference of 1884–1885. Major European powers gathered to formalize the partition of Africa, seeking to avoid conflict amongst themselves. Leopold, with masterful cunning, presented his Congo Free State as a neutral zone, open to free trade for all nations and dedicated to suppressing slavery. He skillfully portrayed his personal venture as a collective European effort for civilization. The powers, wary of any single nation dominating the strategically important Congo Basin, surprisingly conceded to Leopold's personal control over a territory 76 times the size of Belgium, an agreement that sealed the fate of millions. Thus, the Congo Free State was born, not as a colony of Belgium, but as the personal fiefdom of King Leopold II. This vast territory, rich in natural resources, became his private property, his absolute domain. He wielded unchecked legislative, executive, and judicial power, accountable to no one. This unique status allowed him to operate outside the scrutiny and laws that might govern a traditional state colony, creating a legal vacuum ripe for exploitation. It was a kingdom built on paper, but soon to be etched in blood, where the king's word was law and his profit was the only moral compass. In its initial years, the Congo Free State struggled to generate the immense profits Leopold envisioned. The primary commodity was ivory, hunted and collected by coerced labor. While the ivory trade was lucrative, it was not sufficient to satisfy Leopold's extravagant desires and the costs of maintaining his burgeoning administration and private army. The early administration was characterized by a mix of exploration, rudimentary infrastructure building, and the nascent establishment of forced labor practices, setting a dangerous precedent for the horrors to come. The hunt for profitable resources intensified, pushing the regime towards ever more brutal methods of extraction. To enforce his absolute rule and compel labor, Leopold established the Force Publique, a private army unlike any other. Composed largely of conscripted Africans from different regions, often far from their homes, and led by European officers, the Force Publique became the primary instrument of terror. These soldiers, themselves victims of coercion, were trained to be ruthlessly efficient, loyal only to Leopold's administrators. They policed the vast territory, suppressed any dissent, and enforced the increasingly harsh labor demands. Their presence instilled widespread fear, marking the beginning of a systematic reign of violence that would define the Congo Free State. As the 19th century drew to a close, a new commodity emerged from the Congo's dense forests that would irrevocably alter its destiny: wild rubber. The burgeoning industrial revolution in Europe and America, fueled by the invention of the automobile and the bicycle, created an insatiable global demand for rubber tires. The Congo Basin was found to be extraordinarily rich in rubber vines, promising unimaginable wealth. This discovery transformed Leopold's struggling enterprise into a potential gold mine, unleashing a voracious appetite for profit that would overshadow any semblance of his initial humanitarian claims, paving the way for an era of unprecedented barbarity. With the discovery of vast rubber resources, Leopold's humanitarian facade crumbled entirely. The Congo Free State transformed from a supposed beacon of civilization into a vast, privately owned rubber plantation. Every policy, every decree, every action became singularly focused on maximizing rubber extraction. The indigenous population, once promised freedom from slavery, was now enslaved by a new, more insidious master. The dream of progress and enlightenment twisted into a nightmare of exploitation, where the land's bounty became a curse, and the lives of millions were deemed expendable in the relentless pursuit of profit for one man's empire. The implementation of the rubber quota system sealed the fate of millions. Every village, every adult male, and often women and children, were assigned impossible quotas of wild rubber to collect from the treacherous jungle. Failure to meet these demands was met with horrific consequences, transforming daily life into an endless, desperate struggle for survival. The system ensured that no one could escape the grip of Leopold's administrators and their force publique, turning the very act of living into a compulsory contribution to the king's personal fortune, a cruel irony for a free state built on such brutal compulsion. Villages across the vast Congo Free State were systematically decimated by the relentless demands for rubber. Entire communities were uprooted, their traditional way of life shattered, as able-bodied men were forced into the deepest forests, often for weeks, to collect the sticky sap. Those who remained in the villages, mostly women, children, and the elderly, faced starvation and disease as agricultural production ceased. The social fabric of countless societies was torn apart, leaving behind only the skeletal remains of once vibrant communities, a chilling testament to the devastating impact of industrial-scale forced labor and neglect. The chikot, a whip made from dried hippopotamus hide with a razor-sharp edge, became the ubiquitous symbol of Leopold's reign of terror. Public floggings were a common spectacle, brutally administered to those who failed to meet quotas, or merely to instill fear and obedience. Each lash ripped flesh, leaving deep, permanent scars that served as a constant reminder of the regime's arbitrary cruelty. The chikot was not just a tool of punishment, it was a psychological weapon used to break the spirit of the Congolese people, forcing them into submission through sheer, unadulterated pain and humiliation. To ensure compliance with the rubber quotas, the force publique adopted the monstrous practice of hostage-taking. Women, children, and elderly relatives were seized from villages and confined in hostage houses, subjected to starvation, abuse, and often death, until their male family members delivered the required rubber. These innocent captives became pawns in Leopold's brutal game, their suffering a direct leverage against the reluctant laborers. The agonizing choice between watching one's family perish or condemning oneself to endless, dangerous labor created an unbearable psychological torment, illustrating the depths of depravity to which the system sank. Perhaps the most chilling symbol of Leopold's atrocities was the systematic practice of severing hands. Soldiers of the force publique were often issued a limited number of bullets and were required to present the severed hand of a victim for each bullet used, proving it wasn't wasted on hunting or revolt. This gruesome accounting method led to unimaginable horrors, as soldiers began indiscriminately cutting off hands from the living and the dead, not just from those they killed, but also from innocents to meet their quotas or to cover for wasted ammunition. It became a currency of terror, a tangible manifestation of the regime's inhumanity. The details of the mutilations were beyond horrifying. Accounts describe victims, still alive, watching their hands hacked off by machetes, left to bleed out in the jungle or die from infection. Entire baskets of severed hands were collected by the force publique, brought to European agents as proof of their work. The sheer scale of this barbarity transformed the Congo into a landscape of unspeakable agony, where human life was cheaper than a bullet. These gruesome trophies, often smoked to preserve them, became a perverse symbol of control, embodying the complete dehumanization of the Congolese people and the moral decay of Leopold's agents. No one was safe, not even children. The grotesque practice of severing hands extended to the youngest victims. There are countless reports of children, too young to work, having their small hands amputated either to prove a bullet kill or simply because their parents failed to meet quotas. Sometimes, their hands were taken as a warning to their families or just to fill the baskets of evidence. The image of a child, maimed and left to die, became a stark, undeniable indictment of the regime's complete lack of mercy or conscience, etching an indelible stain on humanity's history. Beyond the direct violence, famine and disease swept through the devastated Congolese population. Forced labor meant traditional farming was abandoned, leading to widespread starvation. The constant movement of people, coupled with unsanitary conditions in labor camps and hostage houses, created fertile ground for epidemics. Smallpox, sleeping sickness, and dysentery ravaged communities, already weakened by malnutrition and brutal treatment. The immense demographic collapse was not merely a result of bullets and chikots, but also the silent, insidious killers of hunger and illness, which collectively claimed millions of lives, turning a vibrant land into a vast graveyard. Despite the overwhelming terror, pockets of resistance and desperate attempts to flee the brutal regime emerged. Some communities abandoned their homes, seeking refuge in remote forests, enduring starvation and disease rather than submission. Others engaged in direct, albeit often futile, rebellion against the heavily armed force publique. These acts of defiance, whether overt or covert, were met with extreme, disproportionate force, serving as brutal examples to deter further uprisings. The stories of flight and resistance underscore the unimaginable courage and despair of a people caught in the grip of a relentless, and merciless oppressor, fighting for their very existence. Amidst the atrocities, Leopold's propaganda machine often circulated exaggerated or fabricated stories of Congolese cannibalism, portraying the indigenous people as inherently savage and primitive. These narratives, despite often being baseless or misconstrued, served a crucial purpose: to dehumanize the victims and justify the brutal, civilizing mission. By depicting the Congolese as barbaric, Leopold aimed to deflect international criticism and frame his regime's violence as a necessary measure to bring order to a chaotic land. This insidious rhetoric became another layer of violence, systematically stripping the Congolese of their humanity and legitimizing their subjugation in the eyes of the world. The methods of rubber collection themselves were often unsustainable and excruciating. Congolese laborers were forced to climb towering wild rubber vines, slash the bark, and collect the flowing sap. In some regions, they would smear the sticky latex over their own bodies, letting it dry, then painfully peeling it off, often tearing skin and causing severe wounds. This primitive and brutal extraction process, coupled with the impossible quotas and the constant threat of violence, ensured that every ounce of rubber was literally extracted with sweat, blood, and immense human suffering, leaving both the land and its people scarred. The insatiable demand for rubber led to widespread environmental devastation. The relentless overharvesting of wild rubber vines, often without any thought for sustainable practices, quickly depleted natural resources. Vast swathes of pristine rainforest were stripped bare as the force publique pushed deeper into untouched territories in search of new rubber sources. This ecological destruction mirrored the human suffering, as the land itself was exploited to the point of exhaustion, further disrupting indigenous livelihoods and exacerbating famine. The natural bounty of the Congo, once a source of life, was systematically plundered and destroyed for King Leopold's avarice. The true scale of death during Leopold's reign remains a grim historical debate, but conservative estimates suggest that the population of the Congo was halved, with figures ranging from 8 to 15 million lives lost. This demographic catastrophe, largely unseen and unheard by the outside world for decades, was a combination of direct murder, mutilation, starvation, forced labor, and disease. It represents one of the most horrific genocides in human history, a silent holocaust perpetuated by a single man's greed, leaving an indelible scar on the soul of the Congo and a chilling testament to the capacity for human cruelty. Isolated European agents, stationed in remote outposts deep within the Congo Free State, wielded unchecked power. Far from any oversight or accountability, these men, often driven by personal greed and a sense of racial superiority, became absolute despots in their small domains. They commanded the force publique, set quotas, administered justice, and enforced brutal punishments with impunity. Their cruelty was often amplified by the oppressive isolation and the availability of vulnerable populations. These remote stations became microcosms of the entire brutal system, where the line between administrator and torturer blurred completely, fostering an environment of absolute terror. While the Congo bled, King Leopold II presented himself to the world as a benevolent monarch, a visionary leader bringing civilization to Africa. He used the immense profits, extracted through unspeakable brutality, to fund lavish public works in Belgium, constructing grand avenues, magnificent parks, and opulent palaces. These impressive architectural feats, dubbed Leopold's monuments, served as a deceptive showcase of his supposed success and philanthropy. The blood money of the Congo transformed Belgium's landscape, a stark and macabre contrast between the suffering that financed it and the grandeur it created, a chilling monument to hypocrisy. Despite Leopold's tight grip on information, whispers of the horrific atrocities slowly began to leak out of the Congo. Brave missionaries, deeply disturbed by what they witnessed, started sending letters and reports back to their home countries, detailing the systematic cruelty, the severed hands, and the widespread suffering. A few disillusioned European agents, unable to stomach the barbarity any longer, also started speaking out. These initial murmurs, though often dismissed or suppressed by Leopold's powerful propaganda, planted the seeds of doubt and ignited the first sparks of international awareness, challenging the carefully constructed narrative of progress. A pivotal figure in exposing Leopold's crimes was Edmund Denny Morel, a British shipping clerk. Morel noticed a peculiar imbalance in trade manifests. Ships arriving in Antwerp from the Congo carried immense quantities of rubber and ivory, while outgoing ships were laden primarily with guns, ammunition, and soldiers, with very few legitimate trade goods. This discrepancy sparked his suspicion, leading him to deduce that the trade was, in fact, an elaborate system of forced extraction, not commerce. His meticulous investigation ignited a personal crusade, transforming him into a formidable opponent of Leopold's regime. Roger Casement, a British diplomat and consul in the Congo Free State, was deeply disturbed by the accounts he encountered. Tasked with investigating the rumors, Casement embarked on an extensive journey through the interior, meticulously documenting eyewitness testimonies, visiting devastated villages, and observing the pervasive evidence of mutilation and abuse. His official report, compiled with painstaking detail and cold, irrefutable facts, presented a damning indictment of Leopold's administration, moving beyond rumor to provide concrete, verifiable proof of widespread crimes against humanity, shattering the illusion of a benevolent, civilizing mission. The publication of Casement's report in 1904 sent shockwaves through the international community. Though initially downplayed by some, its meticulously documented accounts and Casement's unimpeachable reputation made it impossible to ignore. The report's chilling details of severed hands, hostage-taking, and systematic depopulation awakened a horrified public, particularly in Britain and the United States. It provided the first official, governmental confirmation of the unspeakable cruelties, sparking outrage and demanding accountability from a European monarch whose private enterprise was now exposed as a vast death camp disguised as a humanitarian project. Inspired by Morel and galvanized by Casement's report, the Congo Reform Association, CRA, was founded in 1904. Led by Morel, this grassroots movement quickly gained international momentum, uniting missionaries, politicians, journalists, and concerned citizens from across Europe and America. The CRA became a powerful advocacy group, employing every available means: public speeches, pamphlets, newspaper articles, and lobbying efforts to expose Leopold's atrocities and demand reforms. It was one of the first major international human rights campaigns, demonstrating the power of organized public opinion against state-sponsored crimes. The CRA strategically utilized the testimonies of survivors and the grim evidence of mutilations, including photographs, to rally public opinion. Images of Congolese men, women, and children with severed hands or missing limbs were circulated widely, providing undeniable visual proof of the horrors. These powerful and visceral images, disseminated through newspapers and lantern slide lectures, shocked the complacent Western public, making the abstract suffering concrete and personal. The visual evidence became an unignorable testament to Leopold's barbarity, fueling widespread condemnation and turning the tide of public sentiment against his regime. The artistic and literary world also joined the chorus of outrage. Mark Twain, deeply moved by the unfolding tragedy, penned his scathing satire, King Leopold's Soliloquy, in which he imagined Leopold attempting to justify his monstrous actions. Joseph Conrad's dark masterpiece, Heart of Darkness, though a fictionalized account, drew heavily from his own experiences in the Congo, and captured the moral decay and brutality of the colonial enterprise. These powerful literary works amplified the voices of protest, translating the grim reality into a cultural narrative that resonated deeply and exposed the moral bankruptcy of Leopold's reign. Faced with mounting international pressure, Leopold launched an aggressive counter-propaganda campaign. He poured vast sums of money into bribing journalists, publishing misleading pamphlets, and hiring public relations experts to whitewash his image and discredit his accusers. He dismissed the reports as exaggerations, blamed the savagery of the Congolese for any violence, and maintained his facade of a benevolent ruler bringing civilization. He even set up his own commission of inquiry, designed to produce a favorable report. However, the sheer weight of evidence and the relentless efforts of the CRA ultimately overwhelmed his desperate attempts at denial and cover-up. The tide of international opinion irrevocably turned against King Leopold. Britain, a key player and once a supporter, now led calls for reform, joined by the United States, which had also initially recognized the Free State. Other European powers began to echo the demands for intervention and an end to the brutal private rule. The moral outcry, combined with geopolitical interests and the fear of instability, created an irresistible force. Leopold found himself increasingly isolated, his carefully constructed edifice of deception crumbling under the weight of global condemnation and the undeniable truth of his crimes. Under overwhelming international pressure, King Leopold II was finally forced to relinquish his personal control over the Congo Free State in 1908. Reluctantly, he bequeathed his vast private domain to the Belgian state, albeit after negotiating a substantial financial settlement and ensuring many incriminating records were destroyed. The territory was renamed the Belgian Congo, marking the end of the most brutal phase of direct private exploitation. While the handover brought some administrative reforms, the scars of Leopold's reign ran deep, and the legacy of exploitation and suffering continued under a different colonial banner. The transition to the Belgian Congo in 1908, while ending the grotesque excesses of Leopold's personal rule, did not immediately usher in an era of liberation or justice. The core mechanisms of colonial exploitation, albeit more regulated, largely persisted. Forced labor continued, resources were still extracted for Belgian benefit, and the indigenous population remained subjugated. The shift was more about state control and management than genuine reform, perpetuating a system that had already inflicted unimaginable damage, ensuring that the healing process for the Congolese would be agonizingly slow and incomplete. The demographic catastrophe and psychological trauma inflicted during the Congo Free State era left an indelible mark on generations of Congolese. Entire family lines were wiped out, cultural traditions shattered, and the very fabric of society torn apart. The pervasive fear, the memories of brutality, and the deep-seated mistrust of authority continued to haunt the collective consciousness. This period of intense suffering created deep historical wounds that continue to affect the nation today, shaping its political instability, social dynamics, and the ongoing struggle for true self-determination and reconciliation after such profound loss. In a final act of calculated malice, King Leopold II ordered the destruction of most of his Congo Free State archives before the Belgian state took over. He famously stated, "I will give them my Congo, but they have no right to know what I did there." This deliberate act of historical erasure was an attempt to bury the evidence of his crimes, to rewrite the narrative, and to escape accountability. Despite his efforts, the testimonies, reports, and photographs preserved by missionaries and activists ensured that the truth, though obscured, could never be entirely silenced, a testament to the enduring power of historical memory. Today, the legacy of King Leopold II and the Congo Free State remains a deeply contentious and painful subject. Debates rage over the removal of his statues in Belgium, the demand for reparations, and the need for a full and honest reckoning with Belgium's colonial past. For many, Leopold symbolizes the worst excesses of colonialism, a stark reminder of unchecked power, systemic racism, and the devastating human cost of greed. The ongoing struggle to acknowledge, educate, and atone for these historical crimes highlights the enduring importance of remembering such brutal chapters of human history. The horrifying story of King Leopold's Congo serves as a chilling, timeless lesson about the dangers of unchecked power, the seductive lure of greed, and the catastrophic consequences of dehumanization. It reminds us that behind the grand narratives of progress and civilization, unimaginable atrocities can be perpetrated in silence. It compels us to confront the dark underbelly of history, to listen to the voices of the victims, and to remain vigilant against any system that seeks to strip individuals of their dignity and humanity for profit. This brutal chapter must never be forgotten, for in remembering, we honor the millions who perished and seek to prevent such horrors from ever recurring.